The crystal chandelier cast dancing shadows across the marble floor as Amara Johnson stood frozen in the doorway of the Grand Mansion's main hall. Her worn cleaning uniform felt like sandpaper against her trembling skin as she stared at the man she had known for 3 months as Marcus, the humble janitor from her apartment building. But now, surrounded by priceless artwork and luxury that could feed her entire neighborhood for years, the truth hit her like a lightning bolt. Marcus wasn't a janitor at all. He was Marcus Okafor, one of the wealthiest men in Atlanta, standing in his own mansion wearing a $1,000 suit that probably cost more than she made in 6 months. The mop and bucket he carried every evening, the simple clothes, the humble smile when he helped her carry groceries up 4 flights of stairs, it had all been an elaborate lie. "Surprise," he said softly, his familiar voice now carrying an authority she had never heard before. Behind him stood a beautiful little boy, no more than 7 years old, with Marcus's same warm brown eyes but filled with a sadness that made Amara's heart ache. "I don't understand," Amara whispered, her cleaning supplies falling from her hands and clattering onto the polished floor. "You said you were just Marcus from apartment 2B. You said you worked nights at the office building downtown." Marcus took a step closer, and she could see something desperate in his eyes. "I am still just Marcus, Amara. Everything between us has been real. But I need you to understand why I couldn't tell you the truth from the beginning." The little boy tugged at Marcus's expensive jacket. "Daddy, is this the nice lady you told me about? The one who makes you smile again?" Amara's legs nearly gave out beneath her. Daddy. Marcus had never mentioned having a child. In all their conversations over the past 3 months, all their evening walks, all the times he had helped her when money was tight, he had never once mentioned being a father. "This is Kemi, my son," Marcus said, placing a protective hand on the boy's shoulder. "And he's the reason I've been pretending to be someone I'm not." The room began to spin as Amara tried to process everything. The man she had been falling in love with, the man who understood her struggles because she thought he lived them too, was actually a millionaire who had been playing an elaborate game of dress-up. But why? And what did his son have to do with any of it? "I have something to show you," Marcus continued, pulling out his phone and scrolling to a news article. The headline made Amara's blood run cold. "Millionaire son still missing mother after tragic death. Nannies can't fill the void." But it was the next headline, dated just 4 months ago, that made her understand the true depth of what she had stumbled into. "Atlanta's most eligible bachelor announces unusual search for child's new mother. Will only consider women who love Kemi for who he is, not what he represents." Amara looked from the phone to Marcus, then down at little Kemi, who was studying her with the intensity of a child who had watched too many potential mothers walk away. The pieces were starting to fall into place, but the picture they formed was more shocking than anything she could have imagined. "You've been testing me," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "All this time, you've been testing me to see if I would be good enough to be his mother." Marcus's silence was all the confirmation she needed. But as she stood there in that magnificent mansion, surrounded by wealth beyond her wildest dreams, one question burned brighter than all the others. What would happen now that she had passed a test she never knew she was taking? Three months earlier, the oppressive Atlanta heat made the 4th-floor climb to Amara's cramped apartment feel like scaling a mountain. Her uniform from the cleaning service clung to her skin as she struggled with 2 bags of groceries she could barely afford. At 19, she had been working 3 jobs just to keep her head above water since her grandmother passed away the year before, leaving her completely alone in the world. The elevator in the rundown apartment building had been broken for 6 months, and the landlord showed no signs of fixing it anytime soon. As Amara paused on the 2nd-floor landing to catch her breath, she heard footsteps behind her. "Here, let me help you with those." She turned to see a man about her age, maybe a few years older, with kind eyes and calloused hands reaching for her grocery bags. He was wearing faded work clothes and had the tired look of someone who understood long days and short paychecks. "Oh, you don't have to do that," Amara protested, but he was already taking the heavier bag from her arms. "I'm Marcus," he said with a smile that seemed to light up the dim stairwell. "I just moved into 2B last week. Still getting used to this climb myself." "Amara for C," she replied, grateful for the help but wary. In her experience, men who offered help usually wanted something in return, and she had learned to be careful. But as they climbed the remaining 2 floors, Marcus just made easy conversation about the heat and asked if she knew whether the corner store stayed open late. Nothing that set off alarm bells. When they reached her door, he handed over her groceries with that same warm smile. "Thanks for the help," Amara said, fishing for her keys. "Any time, neighbor," Marcus replied, then hesitated. "I work night shifts at the office building downtown, so if you ever need help with anything heavy during the evening, just knock." Over the following weeks, their paths crossed regularly. Marcus seemed to keep the same odd schedule she did, always heading out for his night shift just as she was coming home from her evening cleaning job. Sometimes they would walk to the bus stop together, and Amara found herself looking forward to these brief conversations. He never pried into her business, never made her feel ashamed about counting coupons at the grocery store or wearing the same 3 outfits in rotation. Instead, he shared stories about his own struggles, about working multiple jobs to make ends meet, about the loneliness that came with being new in the city. "I moved here for a fresh start," he told her one evening as they waited for their respective buses. "Sometimes you need to go somewhere nobody knows who you're supposed to be, you know?" Amara understood that feeling completely. "What kind of fresh start?" she asked. Marcus was quiet for a long moment, staring down the street as if he could see something she couldn't. "I lost someone important to me. Someone who made everything make sense. I'm trying to figure out how to build a life worth living without them." The pain in his voice was so genuine that Amara felt her own chest tighten. She had carried that same ache since her grandmother died. "I'm sorry," she said softly. "What about you?" he asked, changing the subject with the skill of someone practiced at deflecting sympathy. "Always lived in Atlanta? Born and raised, but it's just me now," Amara replied. "My grandmother raised me after my parents died in a car accident when I was little. She passed last year, and I'm still figuring out how to do this whole adult thing on my own." They fell into comfortable silence after that, 2 people who understood loss sitting together at a bus stop, neither trying to fix what couldn't be fixed. As the weeks passed, their friendship deepened. Marcus would sometimes bring her coffee when he knew she had worked a double shift. She would save him leftovers when she made too much of the simple meals she could afford. They developed a rhythm, a easy companionship that felt natural and unforced. What Amara didn't know was that every evening, after she disappeared into her apartment, Marcus would walk 3 blocks away from the building, where a black Mercedes waited with his driver behind the wheel. He would change out of his work clothes in the back seat and be driven to his mansion in Buckhead, where his son Kemi waited for bedtime stories and questions about his day. And what Marcus didn't tell her was that Kemi's bedtime stories were increasingly filled with tales of the nice lady from Daddy's building, who smiled like sunshine and never seemed to have enough but always shared what she had. The little boy had begun asking when he could meet this wonderful woman his father spoke of with such warmth. But Marcus had learned to be careful. In the 2 years since his wife died, he had watched woman after woman show interest in Kemi only until they learned about the fortune that came with being Marcus Okafor's son. The boy had been rejected, ignored, and treated like an inconvenience by too many people who saw dollar signs instead of a grieving child. So Marcus continued his double life, testing whether Amara's kindness was real or just another performance. He had no idea that his carefully constructed deception was about to collide with a truth that would change everything. Because 3 floors above, every night as she fell asleep, Amara found herself thinking about the gentle janitor who seemed to understand her struggles, never knowing that her growing feelings were about to trap them both in a web of lies that neither of them had intended to weave. The rain hammered against the windows of the downtown office building where Amara worked her evening cleaning shift. It was nearly midnight, and she was running behind schedule because the elevator had broken down earlier, forcing her to haul her supplies up 12 flights of stairs. Her back ached, her feet were screaming in her worn-out sneakers, and she still had 4 more floors to clean before she could go home. As she pushed her cart down the dimly lit hallway of the 8th floor, she nearly collided with someone coming out of one of the offices. "Marcus," she said, surprised to see her neighbor in the same building where she worked. He looked equally startled to see her, and for a split second, something that looked almost like panic flashed across his face before he recovered his composure. "Amara, hey," he said, quickly stepping back into the shadows of the hallway. "I didn't know you worked here." "Night shift cleaning crew," she explained, gesturing to her cart full of supplies. "I thought you said you worked downtown, but I figured it was a different building. Yeah, well, Marcus said, and she noticed he seemed unusually nervous. Small world, I guess. Something felt off about the encounter, but Amara couldn't put her finger on what it was. Marcus was wearing the same type of simple work clothes she always saw him in, but he seemed different somehow. More tense. Like he was hiding something. What floor do you work on? She asked, genuinely curious. Oh, different floors, different nights, Marcus said vaguely. I'm kind of a floater, you know? Go where they need me. Amara nodded, though his explanation didn't quite make sense. Most janitors she knew had assigned sections, especially in a building this large. But she was too tired to think about it deeply. Well, I better get back to work, she said, starting to push her cart past him. See you back at the building. Amara, wait, Marcus called softly. When she turned back, he was studying her face with an intensity that made her heart skip. You look exhausted. How many jobs are you working? The question caught her off guard. Most people didn't notice things like that, or if they did, they didn't care enough to ask. 3, she admitted. Morning shift at the diner, afternoon cleaning houses, and this at night. Trying to save up enough to maybe take some college classes eventually. Marcus was quiet for a long moment, and in the dim hallway lighting, she couldn't quite read his expression. That's a lot for anyone to handle, he said finally. It's what I have to do, Amara replied with a shrug. Bills don't pay themselves. What would you study? In college, I mean. The question surprised her. No one had asked her about her dreams in a long time. Social work, maybe. Or teaching. Something where I could help kids who are in situations like I was. Kids who don't have anyone looking out for them. Something shifted in Marcus's expression when she said that. Something she couldn't identify, but that seemed important. That's a beautiful dream, he said quietly. What about you? Amara asked. Did you always want to do maintenance work? Again, that strange flash of something across his face. No, he said after a pause. I wanted to do something that would make a difference. Help people who really needed it. But life doesn't always work out the way you plan. They stood there in the empty hallway, two people sharing pieces of themselves in the fluorescent twilight of a building where dreams came to clock in and collect paychecks. Amara felt drawn to Marcus in a way that scared her. She had built walls around her heart after losing everyone who mattered to her, but something about him made those walls feel less necessary. I should really get back to work, she said reluctantly. Of course. But Amara. Marcus stepped closer, and she could smell his cologne, something expensive that seemed out of place with his simple clothes, though she didn't think much of it at the time. Be careful walking home alone this late. This isn't the safest neighborhood. I always am, she assured him, touched by his concern. What Amara didn't see, as she continued her cleaning rounds, was Marcus pulling out an expensive smartphone and making a quick call. She didn't see him speaking in low, urgent tones to someone on the other end. And she certainly didn't see him disappearing into a private elevator that only went to the top floor, where the executive offices were located. If she had followed that elevator to the top floor, she would have discovered that Marcus wasn't a janitor at all, but rather that he owned the entire building. She would have seen the nameplate on the largest corner office that read Marcus Okafor, CEO, and the family photo on his desk showing him in an expensive suit, standing next to a beautiful woman holding a small boy. But she didn't see any of that. Instead, she finished her shift and took the bus home, thinking about the man who seemed to care about her safety and her dreams. She had no way of knowing that Marcus had already made arrangements for additional security to patrol the route she walked from the bus stop to their apartment building, or that he had quietly spoken to her supervisor about adjusting her schedule so she wouldn't have to work quite so late. Back in his penthouse office, Marcus stood at the floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city lights and thought about the young woman 12 floors below, scrubbing office floors to chase a dream of helping others. In 3 months of knowing Amara, he had watched her work herself to the bone while maintaining a kindness and optimism that reminded him of his late wife. But the test wasn't complete yet. He needed to know if her feelings for him were real, if her character was as genuine as it seemed. Because somewhere in his mansion across town, his son Kemi was struggling with nightmares and a sadness that no amount of money could fix. The boy needed a mother figure who would love him for himself, not for the inheritance he represented. Marcus had made that mistake before, trusting too quickly, and Kemi had paid the price. This time, he would be absolutely certain before he allowed anyone into their lives permanently. He had no idea that his deception was about to become far more complicated than he had ever imagined. 2 months into their friendship, Amara's world came crashing down on a Tuesday that started like any other day. She had just finished her morning shift at the diner when her phone rang with news that made her legs give out right there on the sidewalk. "Miss Johnson, this is Carol from Metro General Hospital. Your grandmother's medical bills from last year have been turned over to collections, and there's been an administrative error. The insurance claim was denied, and you now owe $18,000. Payment is due within 30 days, or legal action will be taken." $18,000. The number echoed in Amara's head as she sat on the concrete steps outside the diner, staring at her phone. She made maybe $22,000 a year working 3 jobs. There was no way, no possible way she could come up with that kind of money. That evening, Marcus found her sitting in the stairwell between the 2nd and 3rd floors of their apartment building, crying quietly into her hands. He had been heading out for what she thought was his night shift, but when he saw her there, he immediately sat down beside her. "Hey, what's wrong?" he asked gently, his voice full of genuine concern. For a moment, Amara couldn't even speak. The weight of everything felt crushing. "I'm sorry," she finally managed. "I don't usually fall apart like this." "You don't have to apologize for having feelings," Marcus said softly. "What happened?" Through her tears, Amara told him about the phone call, about the impossible debt, about how she had already been working herself to exhaustion just to survive, and now this. "I don't know what to do," she whispered. "I can't lose the only home I have left, but there's no way I can pay this." Marcus listened without interrupting, and when she finished, he was quiet for a long moment. In his mind, he was calculating how easily he could make this problem disappear for her. $18,000 was pocket change to him, less than he spent on dinner at high-end restaurants. But he couldn't just offer to pay it without revealing who he really was, and he wasn't ready for that yet. "There has to be something we can do," he said finally. "Maybe we can look into legal aid, or see if the hospital has payment plans." "I already tried all that," Amara said, wiping her eyes. "They want a lump sum, or they're going to garnish my wages and put a lien on anything I own." Marcus felt his heart breaking watching her struggle with something he could fix with a single phone call. The urge to reveal everything, to tell her who he really was and solve all her problems, was almost overwhelming. But he forced himself to remember why he was being so careful. "I have some savings," he said carefully. "Not a lot, but maybe I could help with part of it." Amara looked at him with surprise. "Marcus, no. I can't take your money. You work just as hard as I do for what you have." "It's not about taking," Marcus said. "It's about helping each other. Isn't that what friends do?" The kindness in his voice made fresh tears spring to Amara's eyes. "I don't know how I would ever pay you back." "We'll figure it out," Marcus said, though he had no intention of ever asking for repayment. "How much do you think you could come up with on your own?" Amara did some quick mental math. "Maybe 3,000, if I sell everything I own and work extra shifts for the next month." "Okay, so we need 15,000, Marcus said, already planning how he would arrange for the money to appear to come from his modest savings rather than his actual accounts. "Let me see what I can do." 3 days later, Marcus appeared at Amara's door with an envelope containing $15,000 in cashier's checks. He had carefully crafted a story about withdrawing his savings and taking out a loan, complete with fake paperwork that made it look legitimate. "I can't believe you did this," Amara said, staring at the checks with disbelief. "Marcus, this is your entire savings." "Money comes and goes," Marcus replied, though the lie tasted bitter in his mouth. "Good people are rare." Amara threw her arms around him in a hug that was meant to last just a moment but somehow stretched longer. Marcus felt the warmth of her gratitude and something deeper, something that made his chest tight with emotions he hadn't felt since his wife died. "I promise I'll pay you back every penny," Amara whispered against his shoulder. "I know you will," Marcus said, though he was already planning ways to ensure she never had to. What Marcus didn't expect was how this act of kindness would change everything between them. Over the following weeks, Amara looked at him differently. The man who had given up his life savings to help her became more than just a friend. She found herself thinking about him constantly, about his gentle hands and kind eyes, about the way he listened without judgment and never made her feel small for her struggles. And Marcus, watching her work even harder to try to pay him back, found himself falling deeper into feelings he hadn't thought he was ready for. Amara's determination to honor her debt, even though he never intended to collect it, showed him a character that was even stronger than he had hoped. But the deception was becoming harder to maintain. Every lie felt heavier. Every moment of pretending to struggle financially while watching her sacrifice everything felt more wrong. And at home, Kemi was asking more and more questions about the woman who made his daddy smile. "Can I meet her soon, Daddy?" Kemi asked one night as Marcus tucked him into bed. "The nice lady from your building?" "Maybe someday, little man," Marcus said, kissing his son's forehead. "I think she would like me," Kemi said with the confidence of a child who had never considered that someone might not. "And I think I would like having a new mama." Marcus's heart clenched at his son's innocent hope. Everything he was doing was for Kemi, to find someone who would love the boy genuinely. But as his feelings for Amara grew stronger, the line between testing her character and deceiving someone he cared about was becoming dangerously blurred. He had no idea that in just a few weeks, a single moment of carelessness would bring his carefully constructed world crashing down around him. Now, if you've been enjoying this story so far, I'd love to know where you're watching from. Drop a comment below and let me know what city or country you're in. And if this story is keeping you on the edge of your seat, don't forget to hit that subscribe button and give this video a thumbs up. Trust me, you won't want to miss what happens next in Amara and Marcus's story, because things are about to get a lot more complicated. The autumn air was crisp as Amara hurried through the upscale Buckhead neighborhood, clutching the address she had scribbled on a piece of paper. She had picked up an emergency cleaning job for triple her usual rate, and even though it meant working on her one day off, she couldn't afford to turn down the money. Every extra dollar went toward paying Marcus back, and she was determined to clear her debt as quickly as possible. The house she was looking for turned out to be a mansion that took her breath away. Iron gates, perfectly manicured lawns, and a circular driveway that could fit 10 of her small apartment. Amara checked the address twice, certain she must have made a mistake, but the numbers matched perfectly. Mrs. Patterson, the elderly housekeeper who had hired her, met her at the service entrance. "You must be Amara. Thank goodness you could come on such short notice. Our regular girl called in sick, and Mr. Okafor is very particular about having the house perfect when his son comes home from his therapy sessions." "Therapy sessions?" Amara asked as she followed the woman through a kitchen that was bigger than her entire apartment. "Poor little thing," Mrs. Patterson said, shaking her head sadly. "Lost his mother 2 years ago, and he's been struggling ever since. His father has tried everything, the best doctors, counselors, even brought in potential stepmothers. But the boy just withdraws more each time. Breaks your heart to see such a sad child in a house with everything money can buy." Amara felt her chest tighten with sympathy. She knew what it was like to lose a parent, to feel alone in the world despite being surrounded by people. "How old is he?" 7. Sweet as can be when he opens up, but that doesn't happen often anymore. Mr. Okafor is at his wit's end. He loves that boy more than life itself, but he doesn't know how to heal that kind of hurt. As Mrs. Patterson showed her around the house, Amara couldn't help but marvel at the luxury surrounding her. Crystal chandeliers, marble floors, artwork that probably cost more than most people's houses. But underneath all the beauty, she sensed a sadness that no amount of money could touch. "I'll be in the kitchen preparing dinner," Mrs. Patterson said. "You can start with the main living areas. And be careful around the family photos in the study. Mr. Okafor is very protective of those." Amara spent the afternoon cleaning rooms that were already spotless, wondering what kind of man could own all this wealth while a child somewhere in the same house carried such pain. She found herself thinking about Marcus and how he would react to seeing a place like this. He worked so hard for so little, while someone else lived in luxury that seemed almost obscene by comparison. As she worked her way through the mansion, she began to notice details that made her curious. Family photos where the woman's face had been carefully positioned to show a loving family, but something in the man's eyes suggested the pictures were older, happier times. Children's toys that looked barely used, as if a child lived here but didn't really play anymore. It was in the study, while she was carefully dusting around the photo frames, that she saw something that made her blood run cold. There, in an ornate silver frame on the massive desk, was a family photo that made her hands shake so badly she nearly dropped her cleaning cloth. The man in the expensive suit, standing proudly next to a beautiful woman and holding a small boy, had familiar eyes. Kind eyes. Eyes that belonged to the face she had been falling in love with for the past 3 months. But it couldn't be. The man in this photo was clearly wealthy, powerful, someone who belonged in a mansion like this. The man she knew was Marcus, her neighbor who worked nights and worried about money and had given her his life savings to help with her debt. With trembling fingers, she picked up the frame to look more closely. The nameplate at the bottom of the photo read, "The Okafor family, Marcus, Catherine, and Kemi." Marcus. The same name, the same face, but this Marcus wore designer clothes and stood in front of what looked like a private jet. This Marcus had the confident posture of someone who had never worried about rent or groceries or whether he could afford to take a sick day. That was taken 3 years ago, before my wife died. Amara spun around, the photo still clutched in her hands, to find Marcus standing in the doorway of the study. But this wasn't the Marcus she knew. This Marcus wore an expensive suit, stood with the authority of someone accustomed to being in charge, and looked at her with an expression she couldn't read. "You're him," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "You're Marcus Okafor." "Yes," he said simply, stepping into the room and closing the door behind him. "But you told me you were a janitor. You said you understood what it was like to struggle." Her voice was getting stronger now, powered by a growing sense of betrayal. "I do understand," Marcus said, taking a step toward her. "More than you know. You gave me $15,000 and told me it was your life savings." Amara's voice cracked with the weight of realization. "You watched me count coupons and wear the same clothes and worry about paying rent, and you knew you could solve all of that with pocket change." "Amara, please let me explain dash." "Explain what?" she demanded, setting the photo down with shaking hands. "How you've been lying to me for 3 months. How you've been playing dress-up and pretending to be poor while I've been killing myself working 3 jobs. How you've been testing me like some kind of experiment." Marcus flinched at the accuracy of her accusations, but he forced himself to meet her eyes. "It started as a test, yes. But it became something else. You became something else." "I became what? Your pet charity case? The poor girl you could study to see how the other half lives." "You became the woman I'm falling in love with," Marcus said quietly, and the sincerity in his voice stopped Amara's angry words mid-sentence. They stared at each other across the expensive study, 2 people who had built something real on a foundation of lies. Amara felt like the ground was shifting beneath her feet, like everything she thought she knew about her life was suddenly suspect. "I need to go," she said, moving toward the door. "Amara, wait. There's something else you need to understand. Someone else you need to meet." Before she could respond, the study door opened and a small boy appeared, the same child from the family photo but sadder now, more fragile. He looked at Amara with curious eyes that were unmistakably his father's. "Daddy, Mrs. Patterson said there was a nice lady here today. Is this her? Is this the lady who makes you smile?" And in that moment, as Amara looked down at the little boy who had lost his mother and was searching for something he couldn't name, she realized that the deception ran even deeper than she had imagined. Kemi stood in the doorway with the careful posture of a child who had learned to read adult faces for signs of rejection. His small hands clutched a worn stuffed elephant, and his eyes moved between Amara and his father with the cautious hope of someone who had been disappointed too many times. "Hello," Amara said softly, crouching down to meet the boy at eye level despite the turmoil raging inside her chest. Something about his shy smile and the way he held his stuffed animal protectively made her maternal instincts override her anger at his father. "I'm Kemi," the boy said, taking a tentative step into the room. "Are you the lady from Daddy's building? The one who shares her food even when she doesn't have very much?" Amara's heart clenched at the innocence in his voice. She glanced up at Marcus, who was watching the interaction with an expression that mixed hope and terror. "Your daddy told you about me?" "Every day," Kemi said, his confidence growing as Amara remained at his level, not towering over him like most adults did. He said you have the kindest heart he's ever known, and that you work really hard to help people even when it's difficult for you. The words hit Amara like physical blows. Even in his deception, Marcus had been telling his son the truth about her character. But knowing that made the betrayal feel somehow worse, not better. "Kemi, sweetheart, why don't you go find Mrs. Patterson?" Marcus said gently. "Miss Amara and I need to finish talking." "But I want to meet her properly," Kemi protested, then looked at Amara with hopeful eyes. "Would you like to see my room? I have lots of books, and Daddy says you like to read." Amara felt trapped between her desire to flee from this house of lies and the genuine need she saw in this little boy's face. "Maybe another time," she said carefully. Kemi's face fell with the practiced disappointment of a child accustomed to adult promises that didn't materialize. "Oh, okay." He turned to go, but paused at the doorway. "Miss Amara? I hope you come back. I've been waiting a long time to meet someone who makes Daddy happy." After Kemi left, the study felt heavy with unspoken truths. Amara stood slowly, her cleaning uniform feeling more out of place than ever in this room of expensive leather and mahogany. "He's beautiful," she said finally, because that much was true and safe to acknowledge. "He's everything to me," Marcus replied, his voice thick with emotion. "Everything I've done, every choice I've made for the past 2 years, has been about trying to help him heal. By lying to women? By pretending to be someone you're not." Marcus ran a hand through his hair, and for the first time since she'd known him, he looked truly vulnerable. "Do you want to know what happened the last time I tried to find someone for Kemi? The last time I was honest about who I am from the beginning." Amara crossed her arms but didn't speak, waiting. Her name was Victoria. Beautiful, educated, said all the right things about wanting to help Kemi through his grief. "We dated for 4 months. I thought she genuinely cared about both of us." Marcus moved to the window, looking out at the perfectly manicured grounds. "One night, I overheard her on the phone with her sister, talking about how she was only putting up with the sad little boy until she could get me to marry her. She called Kemi damaged goods and said she'd send him to boarding school the minute she got a ring on her finger." Amara felt her anger wavering as she imagined how those words must have devastated both father and son. "There were others after Victoria," Marcus continued. "Women who saw dollar signs instead of a grieving child. Women who were sweet to Kemi in front of me but cold when they thought no one was watching. I realized that my money was attracting the wrong kind of person, people who would hurt my son in ways that might never heal." "So you decided to lie instead?" Marcus turned back to face her. "I decided to find out who someone really was before I risked Kemi's heart again. I wanted to find a woman who would be kind to a struggling man, who would show compassion without the promise of reward. Someone who would love genuinely, not because of what she could gain." The logic was sound, but Amara still felt the sting of deception. "And what was your plan? To keep pretending forever? To marry me under false pretenses?" "My plan was to tell you the truth once I was sure," Marcus said. "Once I knew that your feelings were real and that you could love Kemi for who he is." "And when exactly were you going to decide that? After I'd worked myself into the ground trying to pay you back money you didn't need? After I'd fallen completely in love with a man who doesn't exist?" The admission slipped out before Amara could stop it, and she saw Marcus's eyes widen at her words. "You're falling in love with me?" he asked softly. "I was falling in love with Marcus the janitor," Amara corrected, her voice shaking. "The man who understood what it felt like to struggle. The man who sacrificed his savings to help me because he cared. But that man was a lie, wasn't he?" "No," Marcus said firmly, crossing the room to stand in front of her. "That man is real. The kindness, the caring, the conversations we've had about dreams and losses and what matters in life. None of that was pretend. The only thing I lied about was my financial situation." "Only?" Amara laughed bitterly. "Marcus, you let me take $15,000 from you while thinking you were sacrificing everything. You watched me kill myself working extra shifts to pay you back. You sat on that bus stop with me night after night, listening to me worry about money while knowing you could solve every problem I have with a phone call. I know how it looks, Dash. Do you? Do you really? Amara's voice rose with frustration. Because from where I'm standing, it looks like a rich man who was so bored with his privileged life that he decided to play poor for entertainment. It looks like someone who has so much money that other people's struggles seemed like a game to him. Marcus flinched as if she had slapped him. It was never a game. You are not a game. Then what am I, Marcus? What am I to you really? Before he could answer, they heard small footsteps in the hallway and Kemi's voice calling out. Daddy, is Miss Amara still here? I drew her a picture. The sound of the little boy's hopeful voice broke something inside Amara's chest. She looked at Marcus, seeing his own pain reflected in his eyes, and realized that this situation was even more complicated than simple deception. There was a child involved, a child who had already lost one mother and was desperately hoping for another. I need time to think, she said quietly. I need to figure out what's real and what isn't. Amara, please don't disappear, Marcus said, and she could hear genuine fear in his voice. I know I've handled this all wrong, but my feelings for you are real. And Kemi, he's already attached to the idea of you. That's the problem, Amara said, moving toward the door. You've involved a child in this deception. He's going to be hurt no matter what happens now. As she reached for the door handle, Marcus called out one last time. What would it take for you to forgive me? What would it take for us to find a way forward? Amara paused without turning around. I don't know if there is a way forward, she said quietly. Because I don't know who you really are anymore. And I don't know if you know who I really am either, or if I'm just the poor girl who passed your character test. She left then, walking through the mansion that felt like a museum of someone else's life, past the kitchen where Mrs. Patterson was preparing dinner for a family that might never be whole, and out into the autumn air that felt too thin to breathe properly. Behind her, she could hear Kemi asking his father where the nice lady had gone and why Daddy looked so sad. But she couldn't turn back, not yet, not until she figured out how to reconcile the man she had fallen in love with and the man who had orchestrated one of the most elaborate deceptions of her life. For 3 days, Amara moved through her routines like a ghost haunting her own life. She went to her jobs, cleaned houses and offices, served coffee and eggs at the diner, but her mind was constantly elsewhere. Every corner of her small apartment reminded her of Marcus, the groceries he had helped her carry, the evenings they had spent talking on the building's front steps, the envelope of money that now felt like evidence of the most expensive lie ever told. She had called in sick to her cleaning shift at Marcus's building, unable to face the place where their deception had played out night after night. Instead, she picked up extra hours at other locations, throwing herself into work as a way to avoid thinking about the impossible situation she found herself in. But thinking was unavoidable. In the quiet moments between tasks, she found herself analyzing every conversation, every gesture, every moment of their friendship with the bitter clarity of hindsight. How many times had Marcus carefully steered conversations away from certain topics? How many stories about his supposed struggles had been complete fabrications? On the 4th day, she came home to find Mrs. Chen, her elderly neighbor from across the hall, waiting by her door with a concerned expression. Amara, dear, there's been a man coming by looking for you, Mrs. Chen said in her heavily accented English. Nice-looking fellow, very polite, but he seems quite worried. He's been here every evening. What did you tell him? Amara asked, though she already knew who it was. I told him I hadn't seen you, like you asked when you gave me the note. But sweetheart, he looks like a man with something important to say. Maybe you should hear him out. Amara had left a note with Mrs. Chen 3 days ago, asking her to tell Marcus she wasn't available if he came by. She hadn't been ready to face him then, and she wasn't sure she was ready now. Did he say anything else? He left this for you, Mrs. Chen said, pulling an envelope from her pocket. And he mentioned that his little boy has been asking about you every day. Breaks an old woman's heart to think of a sad child. After Mrs. Chen returned to her apartment, Amara sat on her couch staring at the envelope. Her name was written on the front in Marcus's familiar handwriting, but somehow even that felt different now, knowing it came from hands that had never known the calluses of manual labor. Inside was a single sheet of paper and a photograph. The photo showed a much younger Marcus in military uniform, standing next to a woman in a wedding dress who was laughing at something off camera. Both of them looked impossibly young and happy, untouched by the grief that would come later. The letter was brief. Amara, I know you need space, and I'm trying to respect that. But I need you to understand something that I should have told you from the beginning. The photo shows Catherine and me on our wedding day, 5 years ago. We met when I was stationed overseas, before I inherited my family's business, before I had money or knew what it meant to have it. Catherine fell in love with Marcus the soldier, not Marcus the millionaire. When we came back to Atlanta and my life changed, she used to say that money was just numbers on a page, that it didn't change who we were inside. She was the one who taught me that wealth without purpose was just elaborate loneliness. After she died, I lost myself for a while. I became someone who used money to solve problems instead of connecting with people. I hired nannies instead of learning to comfort my son. I threw expensive parties to fill the silence in our house. I dated women who saw dollar signs where Catherine had seen just me. When I started pretending to be a janitor, I wasn't playing a game. I was trying to find my way back to the man Catherine fell in love with, the man who knew how to build something real with someone. You helped me remember who that person was. I understand if you can't forgive the deception. But please don't let my mistakes take away from what we built together. Those conversations on the bus stop, the way you worried about me working too hard, the way you lit up when you talked about your dreams, that was all real. You fell in love with the man I actually am, underneath everything else. If you're willing to give me a chance to prove that, Kemi and I will be at Piedmont Park tomorrow at 2 p.m., by the lake where you told me you used to go with your grandmother. Not Marcus the millionaire with all the answers. Just Marcus the father who's still learning how to heal his son's heart and his own. Marcus. Amara read the letter 3 times, feeling her carefully constructed anger begin to crack around the edges. The photo of him in military uniform showed a different Marcus entirely. Younger, less polished, someone who looked like he belonged in her world rather than towering above it. She thought about Kemi, the little boy with sad eyes who had been waiting to meet someone who made his father smile. She thought about the genuine pain she had heard in Marcus's voice when he talked about the women who had rejected his son. And she thought about her own loneliness, the way Marcus had made her feel less alone in the world for the first time since her grandmother died. But she also thought about the nights she had lain awake worrying about paying him back, the extra shifts she had worked until her body ached, the way she had felt like an equal in their relationship when the entire foundation had been built on his ability to swoop in and save her whenever he chose. That evening, she called her supervisor at the cleaning company and asked to be transferred back to Marcus's building. I need to face some things, she explained, though she didn't elaborate. The building felt different when she arrived for her shift that night. Every hallway held memories of their encounters, every floor reminded her of conversations they had shared. When she reached the 8th floor where she had first run into him, she half expected to see him emerge from the shadows with that familiar smile. Instead, she found something else entirely. Taped to the wall next to the elevators was a child's drawing, clearly made with crayons and the earnest effort of small hands. It showed 3 stick figures holding hands in front of a house, a tall one labeled Daddy, a smaller one labeled Me, and a medium-sized one with long hair labeled Miss Amara. At the bottom, in careful 7-year-old handwriting, were the words, "My new family, I hope." Amara stared at the drawing until her vision blurred with tears. This wasn't just about her and Marcus anymore. There was a child involved, a child who had already imagined her into his family, who was hoping for something he was too young to understand might be impossible. She carefully removed the drawing from the wall and folded it into her pocket. Tomorrow, she would have to decide whether to go to Piedmont Park, whether to give Marcus the chance to prove that the man she had fallen in love with was real. But tonight, she had to finish her shift and figure out how to protect her heart while not breaking a little boy's. As she cleaned the empty offices, she found herself thinking about what her grandmother would have said. The old woman had been a master at seeing through people's facades to their true character. "Actions tell you who someone is, baby girl," she used to say. "Words are easy. Actions cost something." Marcus's actions had been complicated, deceptive in method but protective in intention. He had lied about his circumstances but been truthful about his feelings. He had tested her character while revealing his own need for genuine connection. But Kemi's actions were simple and pure. A child's drawing that showed a family he desperately wanted, hope drawn in crayon and offered without conditions. By the time her shift ended, Amara had made her decision. She would go to Piedmont Park tomorrow, not to forgive or condemn, but to look Marcus in the eye and ask him the one question that mattered most. If she could find a way to trust him again, could he find a way to love her without trying to save her? Because if there was going to be any future between them, it would have to be built on equality, not on the shaky ground of his wealth and her need. Piedmont Park was bathed in golden afternoon sunlight when Amara arrived, 15 minutes late and carrying Kemi's drawing in her jacket pocket like a talisman. She had changed her mind about coming at least 6 times during the walk from the bus stop, but something kept pulling her forward. Maybe curiosity, maybe hope, maybe just the need to see this through to whatever end awaited them. She spotted them by the lake, sitting on the same bench where she used to come with her grandmother to feed the ducks. Marcus wore simple jeans and a plain t-shirt, looking more like the man she had known than the millionaire she had discovered. Kemi was beside him, kicking his small legs and scanning the park with the intense focus of a child waiting for something important. When Kemi saw her approaching, his face lit up with pure joy. "Miss Amara, you came. Daddy said you might not want to see us anymore, but I knew you would come because you have a kind heart." The simple faith in his voice made Amara's chest tight with emotion. She sat down on the bench beside them, maintaining some distance from Marcus but close enough to Kemi that he could reach for her hand if he wanted to. "I brought you something," she said to Kemi, pulling out his drawing. "I found this at my work last night." Kemi's eyes went wide with delight. "You kept it. Does that mean you like it? Does that mean you want to be in my family?" The directness of the question, delivered with such innocent hope, made both adults fall silent for a moment. Amara looked at Marcus over Kemi's head and saw her own uncertainty reflected in his eyes. "That's what we're here to talk about, sweetheart," Marcus said gently to his son. "Miss Amara and I need to have some grown-up conversations first." "But you like each other," Kemi said with the logic of a child who saw the world in simple terms. "And you're both nice to me. Why can't we just be a family?" "Because sometimes adults make things more complicated than they need to be," Amara said softly, surprising herself with the admission. For the next hour, they talked. Not Marcus and Amara, the adults with their complex history of deception and hurt feelings, but 3 people trying to figure out how to fit together in a world that didn't come with instruction manuals. Kemi told Amara about his mother, about how she used to read him stories and make pancakes in funny shapes and sing off-key lullabies that somehow always made him feel safe. He talked about the nightmares he still had sometimes, about missing her so much it felt like a constant ache in his chest. "Daddy tries really hard," Kemi said with the wisdom of a child who had grown up too fast. "But he doesn't know the songs Mama used to sing, and his pancakes are always just circles. He loves me a lot, but sometimes love isn't enough to make the sad go away." Marcus listened to his son's words with visible pain, clearly hearing things Kemi had never said to him directly. "I'm sorry I'm not better at the things your mama was good at," he said quietly. "You don't have to be Mama," Kemi replied. "You just have to be Daddy. But maybe Miss Amara could help with the other parts." The hope in his voice was so pure, so trusting, that Amara felt something crack open inside her chest. This wasn't about Marcus's money or her pride or even the lies that had brought them together. This was about a little boy who had lost one parent and was brave enough to hope for another. "Kemi," she said carefully, "what if Miss Amara and your daddy can't figure out how to make things work? What if we try but it doesn't happen?" Kemi considered this with the seriousness of someone much older. "Then at least we tried," he said finally. "And trying is better than giving up before you start, right?" After Kemi ran off to chase some ducks by the water's edge, Marcus and Amara were left alone on the bench with years of unspoken truths hanging between them. "He's remarkable," Amara said, watching the boy laugh as the ducks ignored his attempts to get their attention. "He gets that from his mother," Marcus replied. "Catherine always said the bravest thing anyone can do is keep their heart open after it's been broken." "Is that what you were doing? Keeping your heart open?" Marcus was quiet for a long moment, watching his son with an expression that mixed love and worry in equal measure. "I was trying to," he said finally. "But I was also trying to protect it. And his. I know that doesn't excuse the lying, but I need you to understand that I wasn't playing games with your feelings. I was terrified of making another mistake that would hurt him." "And what about hurting me?" Amara asked. Did that factor into your calculations? Every day, Marcus said, turning to face her fully for the first time since she had sat down. Every time I watched you work yourself to exhaustion, every time you worried about money I could have provided without thinking twice about it, every time you looked at me with trust one knew I didn't deserve, it killed me a little more. Then why didn't you just tell me the truth? Because I was falling in love with you, Marcus said simply. And I was terrified that the truth would ruin what we were building. By the time I realized the deception was worse than the risk, I was in too deep to know how to get out clean. They sat in silence for a while, watching Kemi play, both lost in thoughts too complicated for easy words. Finally, Amara spoke. I need you to understand something, she said. The man I fell in love with was someone who treated me as an equal, someone who struggled alongside me, who understood what it meant to work for everything you have. I don't know how to love a millionaire who can solve all my problems with a checkbook. Then don't, Marcus said. Love the man who sits on park benches and worries about his son's nightmares and still doesn't know how to make pancakes in funny shapes. Love the man who would give up everything he has if it meant his child could be happy. The money, it's just there. It doesn't have to define us. But it does define us, Amara replied. It defines the power dynamic between us. It defines what I can contribute to this relationship. It defines whether Kemi sees me as someone who belongs in his world or someone his father rescued out of charity. Before Marcus could respond, Kemi came running back to the bench, breathless with excitement. Miss Amara, will you come to dinner at our house tonight? Mrs. Patterson is making her famous fried chicken, and I want to show you my room and all my books. Amara looked at the boy's hopeful face, then at Marcus, who was clearly holding his breath waiting for her answer. Everything logical in her mind said this was moving too fast, that she needed more time to process, that dinner at his mansion would only make the wealth disparity more obvious. But sometimes logic wasn't enough. Sometimes you had to listen to the part of your heart that recognized home when it saw it, even if that home came wrapped in complications you weren't sure how to navigate. Okay, she said, and watched Kemi's face explode with joy. But I have one condition. Anything, Marcus said quickly. We take the bus to your house. All three of us. And we stop at the grocery store on the way so I can contribute something to dinner. If we're going to figure out how to be a family, we start with the understanding that everyone contributes what they can. Marcus looked like he wanted to protest, but something in her expression stopped him. Instead, he nodded slowly. Okay. But I should warn you, it's a really long bus ride to Buckhead. Then we'll have plenty of time to talk, Amara said, reaching into her pocket to pull out Kemi's drawing. She handed it to the little boy, who clutched it against his chest like treasure. And maybe Kemi can tell me more about this family he's been drawing. As they walked toward the bus stop, Kemi between them chattering excitedly about all the things he wanted to show her, Amara caught Marcus looking at her with an expression she couldn't quite read. What? She asked. I'm just thinking, he said, that Catherine would have liked you. She would have said you're exactly the kind of woman who could teach our son that love isn't about what you can buy for someone, but about what you're willing to share. And for the first time since she had discovered the truth about Marcus's identity, Amara allowed herself to believe that maybe, just maybe, they could find a way to build something real together. Hey everyone, we're halfway through this incredible story. I hope you're as invested in Amara and Marcus's journey as I am. If you're loving this tale of deception, love, and second chances, smash that like button and hit subscribe because you definitely don't want to miss how this all plays out. What do you think? Should Amara trust Marcus again? Have you ever been in a situation where someone you cared about wasn't completely honest with you? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. Trust me, the next few chapters are going to test everything these three people think they know about love and family. The bus ride to Buckhead was unlike anything Marcus had experienced in years. Squeezed into a seat between Amara and Kemi, holding grocery bags containing ingredients for cornbread and green beans that Amara had insisted on purchasing, he found himself remembering what it felt like to move through the world without the cushion of wealth smoothing every rough edge. Kemi was enchanted by the entire experience, pressing his face to the window and asking questions about every stop, every neighborhood they passed through. Why don't we take the bus more often, Daddy? It's like a moving adventure. Because your father usually has other ways to get around, Amara said, shooting Marcus a meaningful look over the boy's head. The mansion looked even more imposing when approached from the street rather than through the private gates. Marcus watched Amara's face as they walked up the long driveway, saw her taking in the overwhelming display of wealth with fresh eyes. He had never been more aware of how excessive it all must appear to someone who counted every dollar. "It's really big," Kemi said to Amara, as if seeing his home through her perspective for the first time. "Sometimes I get lost in it. Do you think it's too big?" "I think," Amara said carefully, "that what matters isn't how big a house is, but whether the people inside it love each other." Mrs. Patterson met them at the door, her face lighting up when she saw Amara. "Miss Johnson, what a lovely surprise. And you brought groceries. How thoughtful." "I wanted to contribute something to dinner," Amara explained, holding up the bags. "I hope you don't mind me adding a few items to the menu." "Mind? Honey, I haven't had help in the kitchen in months. Mr. Okafor is many things, but a cook he is not." As they settled into the kitchen, Marcus found himself relegated to the role of observer. Amara moved around the space with confident efficiency, teaching Kemi how to measure cornmeal and explaining to Mrs. Patterson her grandmother's secret for perfect green beans. The three of them fell into an easy rhythm, and Marcus realized this was the most alive his kitchen had felt since Catherine died. "Miss Amara," Kemi said as he carefully stirred the cornbread batter, "will you teach me how to make the pancakes with funny shapes like my mama used to make?" "I'd love to," Amara replied, "but I think that might be something for your daddy to learn too. That way you can make them together." Marcus felt something shift in his chest at the casual way she included him, not as the wealthy father who could hire someone to teach his son, but as a participant in the ordinary magic of family life. Dinner was served in the breakfast nook rather than the formal dining room, at Amara's suggestion. "This feels more like family," she had said, and Marcus didn't argue. The cornbread was perfect. The green beans reminded him of his own grandmother's cooking from his childhood in rural Georgia, and Kemi talked more during that one meal than he had in weeks. "Miss Amara, do you know any songs?" Kemi asked as Mrs. Patterson cleared the dishes. "Mama used to sing to me, but Daddy says he can't carry a tune in a bucket." "I know a few songs," Amara said with a smile. "What kind do you like?" "Happy ones. And maybe some that aren't too happy, for when I miss Mama." Amara's expression grew tender. "I think I know some songs like that. Songs my grandmother used to sing to me when I was missing my parents." They moved to the living room, where Kemi curled up between Amara and Marcus on the couch. Amara's voice, when she began to sing, was nothing special by professional standards, but it filled the cavernous room with warmth that Marcus hadn't felt since Catherine's death. She sang old gospel songs, lullabies, and folk songs that seemed to come from some deep well of cultural memory. Kemi's eyes grew heavy as the songs continued, and Marcus found himself studying Amara's face in the soft lamplight. There was something different about her here, in his home. Not the wariness he had seen at the park, but a kind of settling, as if she was trying on the idea of belonging here. "One more song," Kemi asked sleepily when Amara paused. "What would you like to hear?" "The one Mama used to sing, about being held safe." Amara looked at Marcus questioningly, and he felt his throat tighten. "It was a hymn," he said quietly. "Safe in the arms of Jesus. Catherine sang it every night." "I know that one," Amara said softly, and began to sing the familiar words that had once been Catherine's nightly gift to their son. By the time she finished, Kemi was asleep against her shoulder, his face peaceful in a way Marcus hadn't seen in months. The sight of his son resting so trustingly against this woman who had walked into their lives like an answer to prayers he hadn't known how to pray hit Marcus with overwhelming emotion. "I should put him to bed," Marcus whispered, starting to reach for Kemi. "Let me," Amara said quietly. "If that's okay. I'd like to see his room." Marcus led them upstairs, pointing out family photos along the way, telling Amara stories about Kemi's baby years, about Catherine's pregnancy, about the dreams they had shared for their son's future. Kemi's room was a little boy's paradise, filled with books and toys and a telescope by the window for looking at stars. Amara settled Kemi into his bed with the practiced ease of someone who understood children, tucking his stuffed elephant beside him and smoothing his hair back from his forehead. "Sweet dreams, little man," she whispered, and Kemi smiled in his sleep. As they walked back downstairs, the mansion felt different to Marcus. Less like a museum of his grief and more like a home where healing might be possible. "He's going to be okay," Amara said as they reached the living room. "It might take time, but he's going to be okay." "How can you be so sure?" "Because he still believes in love," she replied. "He still thinks families can be built and rebuilt. Children who've given up on hope don't draw pictures of new families. They don't ask strangers to teach them songs." They sat down on the couch where Kemi had fallen asleep, the space between them feeling charged with possibility and uncertainty in equal measure. "Can I ask you something?" Amara said after a long silence. "Anything. When you were pretending to be a janitor, when you were watching me struggle and worry and work myself to exhaustion, did you ever think about just telling me the truth and offering to help? Not as a test or an experiment, but just because you cared about me." Marcus considered the question seriously. "Yes," he said finally. "More times than I can count. Every time I watched you choose between groceries and medicine, every time you came home exhausted from working 3 jobs, every time you worried about bills that I could have eliminated with a phone call." "Then why didn't you?" "Because I was afraid," Marcus admitted. "Afraid that if you knew about the money, everything between us would change. Afraid you'd start seeing me as a solution to your problems instead of as a person. Afraid that what we were building would become transactional instead of real." "And what about my agency in all of this?" Amara asked, her voice gentle but firm. "What about my right to make choices about my own life, even if those choices weren't what you thought was best for me?" Marcus felt the weight of her words settle over him. "You're right," he said quietly. "I took that away from you. I decided what you could and couldn't handle, what you should and shouldn't know. I made choices for you instead of with you." "Yes, you did," Amara said. "And that's the part I'm struggling with most. Not the money, not even the lying about who you are. It's the fact that you decided you knew better than I did about what I needed to know about my own life." They sat with that truth for a while, both understanding that this was the heart of the matter, the thing that would need to be resolved before they could move forward. "If we were going to try this," Amara said eventually, "if we were going to see if we could build something real together, it would have to be as equals. Not you rescuing me, not me being grateful for your generosity, but both of us contributing what we can to something we build together." "I want that," Marcus said immediately. "More than anything, I want that. Even if it means letting me struggle sometimes. Even if it means not swooping in to fix things when I'm having a hard time." Marcus was quiet for a long moment, thinking about what she was asking. "I don't know if I'm good at that," he said honestly. "Watching people I care about struggle when I could help. It goes against every instinct I have." "Then we'll have to learn together," Amara said. "Because loving someone doesn't mean taking away their challenges. It means being there while they face them." Outside, the city lights twinkled through the large windows, and upstairs, a little boy slept more peacefully than he had in months. In the space between Marcus and Amara on the couch, possibility hung like a bridge waiting to be crossed, fragile but real. "There's something else we need to talk about," Marcus said, breaking the contemplative silence. "What's that?" "What happens next? Tomorrow. Next week. If we're going to try this, we need to figure out how to build a life that works for all 3 of us." Amara looked around the magnificent room, then back at Marcus. "I can't just move into your world," she said. "And you can't keep pretending to live in mine. We need to find something in between, something that's ours." "What would that look like?" "I don't know yet," Amara admitted. "But I think we need to start by being completely honest with each other, about everything. No more tests, no more deceptions, no more deciding what the other person can handle. Just truth, even when it's complicated." "Okay," Marcus said. "Truth. Where do we start?" Amara took a deep breath, as if preparing to dive into deep water. "We start with me telling you that despite everything, despite all the lies and complications and impossible circumstances, I'm still falling in love with you. Both of you. And that terrifies me more than anything else in the world." The admission hung between them like a gift and a challenge, the foundation upon which everything else would have to be built. The morning after their dinner together, Amara woke up in her small apartment with a sense of disorientation that went beyond the usual fog of sleep. For a few precious moments, she could still feel the warmth of Kemi's sleepy weight against her shoulder, could still hear the echo of Marcus's voice as he told stories about his son's childhood. But as consciousness fully returned, so did the magnitude of what she had committed to the night before. She had told Marcus she was falling in love with him and Kemi. She had agreed to try building something real together. But in the harsh light of morning, the practical questions that romance novels never bothered to answer came flooding in. How exactly did a cleaning woman and a millionaire build a life together? Where did they even start? Her phone buzzed with a text message, and she saw Marcus's name on the screen. For a moment, she wondered if he was having second thoughts too, if the spell of the previous evening had worn off for him as well. Good morning. Kemi woke up asking if last night was real or just a really good dream. I told him it was real, but I wanted to check with you first. Was it real for you too? Despite her morning anxieties, Amara found herself smiling at the message. She could picture Kemi waking up with his hair sticking up in all directions, immediately thinking about the woman who had sung him to sleep. It was real, she texted back. How is he this morning? Different. Lighter, somehow. He's been humming one of the songs you taught him while he eats breakfast. Mrs. Patterson says it's the first time she's heard him hum since Catherine died. The response made Amara's chest tighten with emotion. She had seen the change in Kemi too, the way he had relaxed as the evening progressed, the way his smiles had become more frequent and genuine. Whatever else was complicated about this situation, her connection with the little boy felt pure and uncomplicated. I have to work today, she texted. All 3 jobs. But maybe we could talk tonight. Actually, I was hoping we could talk sooner than that. Are you free for lunch? There's something I want to show you. Amara looked around her tiny apartment, at the bills scattered across her kitchen table, at the uniform hanging on her closet door waiting for her afternoon cleaning shift. She had exactly 1 hour between jobs, barely enough time to grab a sandwich, but something in Marcus's message suggested this was important. I have 1 hour between 12 and 1. Where did you want to meet? I'll pick you up at your building at noon. And Amara? Dress comfortably. We're going somewhere that matters. At exactly noon, Amara looked out her window to see not the expensive Mercedes she might have expected, but Marcus himself standing beside a modest sedan, the kind of car that wouldn't draw attention in her neighborhood. He was wearing jeans and a simple button-down shirt, looking more like the Marcus she had first fallen for than the millionaire she was still learning to reconcile. Whose car? She asked as she got in, noting that it was clean but clearly not new, not the kind of vehicle she would associate with someone of his wealth. Mine, Marcus said, pulling away from the curb. I bought it last week. I figured if we're going to learn to navigate the space between our 2 worlds, I needed something that could exist in both. The gesture touched her more than she expected. It was small in the grand scheme of things, but it represented something important. Marcus making changes to accommodate her reality rather than simply expecting her to adjust to his. They drove through Atlanta in comfortable silence, and Amara found herself trying to guess their destination. When Marcus pulled into the parking lot of a modest community center in a neighborhood that was clearly working class but trying hard to improve itself, she was completely confused. Where are we? She asked. Somewhere I think you need to see, Marcus said, getting out of the car and coming around to open her door. The community center was bustling with activity despite the midday hour. Children who were too young for school played in a bright, clean daycare area while their parents attended what looked like job training classes in adjacent rooms. Teenagers who should have been in school but clearly weren't worked with tutors in a corner dedicated to GED preparation. The smell of lunch being prepared wafted from a kitchen where volunteers were clearly working to feed anyone who needed a meal. Marcus, what is this place? Amara asked, watching a young mother about her own age help her toddler with a puzzle while simultaneously taking notes from a textbook. It's the Catherine Okafor Community Center, Marcus said quietly. I established it 2 years ago, after Catherine died. She always said that if she ever had money to give away, she would use it to help people who were working hard to improve their lives but just needed a little support to get there. Amara stopped walking, staring at him with new understanding. You built this for her. I built it because of her, Marcus corrected. She used to volunteer at places like this before we got married, when I was still in the military and we were living paycheck to paycheck. She understood what it meant to have dreams but no clear path to reach them. They walked through the center, and Marcus introduced Amara to staff members and volunteers with obvious pride and familiarity. It was clear that this wasn't just a charity he had written a check for. This was a place where he had invested time and attention, where he knew people's names and stories. The daycare lets parents attend job training or college classes, Marcus explained as they watched children playing. The GED program serves kids who dropped out of high school for various reasons. We have computer classes, financial literacy workshops, even a small legal clinic for people who can't afford lawyers but need help with basic issues. It's incredible, Amara said, meaning it. But there was something in his tone, in the way he was watching her reaction, that made her wonder why he had brought her here. There's more, Marcus said, leading her down a hallway lined with photos of program graduates. This is what I wanted to show you. They stopped in front of a door marked Program Director. Through the glass window, Amara could see an office that was clearly occupied but currently empty. Our program director left last month to take a job in another state, Marcus said. We're looking for someone to replace her. Someone who understands the community we serve, who has experience navigating the systems our clients are trying to navigate, who has the kind of character and compassion that can't be taught. Amara's heart began to beat faster as she realized where this conversation was heading. The job pays well, Marcus continued. Not millionaire well, but enough to live comfortably. Enough to pursue the college degree you've been dreaming about while working in a field that matches your goals. The position comes with full benefits, including tuition assistance. Marcus, Amara said, her voice barely above a whisper. Before you say anything, he said quickly, this isn't about us. I mean, it is, but not in the way you might think. This position has been open for a month. We've been interviewing candidates, but none of them felt right. They had the credentials on paper, but they didn't understand the lives of the people we serve. And then last night, watching you with Kemi, listening to you talk about your dreams of helping kids who are in situations like you were, I realized we'd been looking for you all along. Amara stared through the window at the empty office, her mind racing. Everything about the opportunity sounded perfect, too perfect. How do I know this isn't another test? She asked. How do I know you're not offering me this job because you want to take care of me? Because I'm not offering you anything, Marcus said. I'm telling you about an opportunity. If you're interested, you'll have to interview with the board of directors, just like any other candidate. You'll have to prove you're qualified, just like anyone else. The only advantage you have is that I can tell them you're worth considering. And if the board doesn't think I'm qualified, then you won't get the job, Marcus said simply. And we'll figure out how to build our relationship anyway, because what's between us isn't dependent on where you work or how much money you make. Amara looked around the community center, at the programs that were clearly making a real difference in people's lives, at the opportunity to do work that would matter while earning enough to live without the constant stress she had known for so long. There's something else, Marcus said. Something you should know before you decide whether you're even interested. What? Kemi comes here sometimes, after school. He likes to help with the younger kids in the daycare. If you took this job, you'd see him regularly. Not because I arranged it that way, but because this is part of his life too. The thought of seeing Kemi regularly, of being part of his world in a way that was separate from but connected to his father, felt like both a gift and a responsibility. I need to think about this, Amara said finally. Of course. But Amara. Marcus turned to face her fully. Whatever you decide about the job, it doesn't change what I said last night. I want to build something real with you. I want to figure out how to be a family with you. This is me trying to show you that I see you as more than someone I care about. I see you as someone with gifts and talents and dreams that matter, independent of what they mean to me. As they drove back toward her neighborhood, Amara's mind was spinning with possibilities and fears in equal measure. The job sounded like everything she had ever wanted professionally. The chance to help people, to make a real difference, to use her own experiences to guide others through similar challenges. But it also meant accepting something from Marcus, even if he insisted it wasn't really from him. It meant their relationship would be forever entangled with his wealth and influence, even if indirectly. "Can I ask you something?" she said as they stopped at a red light. "Always. If I don't take this job, if I decide it's too complicated or too connected to you, will that change things between us?" Marcus was quiet for so long that Amara began to worry she had asked the wrong question. Finally, he spoke. "It will disappoint me," he said honestly. "Not because I need you to take the job, but because I think you would be incredible at it, and I think it would make you happy. But it won't change how I feel about you or what I want us to build together." The light turned green, and they continued driving through the Atlanta afternoon, both lost in thoughts about futures that seemed simultaneously possible and impossible, depending on choices that felt too important to make quickly. But in the back of Amara's mind, one thought kept returning. For the first time since her grandmother died, someone was offering her a chance to build the life she had always dreamed of, not as charity or rescue, but as recognition of who she already was and who she was capable of becoming. The question was whether she was brave enough to reach for it. 3 days later, Amara sat across from a conference table filled with people who held her future in their hands. The board of directors for the Catherine Okafor Community Center was more diverse than she had expected. A mix of community leaders, former program participants, local business owners, and social workers who understood the population they served. Marcus wasn't in the room, having recused himself from the interview process entirely to avoid any appearance of impropriety. But his absence somehow made Amara more nervous, not less. This was her chance to prove herself on her own merits, without his influence or support. "Tell us about a time when you had to navigate a complex system while under financial stress," asked Dr. Williams, an older black woman who chaired the board and had introduced herself as a former teacher who had grown up in the same neighborhood where Amara now lived. Amara took a breath and told them about her grandmother's medical bills, about the maze of insurance companies and billing departments and collections agencies she had navigated. But she also talked about what she had learned from the experience. How the system wasn't designed for people who worked multiple jobs and couldn't take time off for phone calls during business hours. How intimidating medical debt could be for someone who had never dealt with anything like it before. "And how would you apply that experience to helping our clients?" asked James Rodriguez, a young man who looked barely older than Amara herself and had been introduced as a former program participant who was now finishing law school. "I would make sure they knew they weren't alone," Amara said without hesitation. "I would help them understand that the system being complicated doesn't mean they're stupid for not knowing how to navigate it. And I would work with them to break overwhelming problems down into manageable steps." For an hour, they asked her questions that tested not just her knowledge but her understanding of the community they served. They asked about her vision for program development, about how she would handle conflicts between participants, about her thoughts on maintaining dignity while providing assistance. When they asked about her long-term goals, Amara found herself being completely honest. "I want to go back to school and get a degree in social work," she said. "I want to understand not just how to help individuals navigate systems, but how to advocate for changes that make those systems more accessible to everyone. I see this position as a chance to learn while making a difference, to serve a community I understand while preparing myself to serve it even better in the future. And you understand that this job would require you to work closely with Mr. Okafor as the center's primary benefactor?" Dr. Williams asked, her eyes sharp with the kind of perception that came from decades of working with people. Amara had been dreading this question, but she met Dr. Williams's gaze directly. "I understand the potential complications," she said. "Mr. Okafor and I have a personal relationship that's still developing. But I also understand that this center serves people who need and deserve the best leadership we can provide, regardless of any personal dynamics. If you hire me, it will be because you believe I can do the job well, not because of my relationship with your benefactor. And I would approach the position with that same professionalism." Dr. Williams nodded slowly, and Amara thought she saw approval in the older woman's expression. After the interview, Amara walked to the bus stop feeling like she had given the best account of herself possible. Whether it would be enough remained to be seen, but she had been honest about her qualifications, her limitations, and her motivations. Whatever the board decided, she could live with it. Her phone buzzed as she waited for the bus. It was a text from Kemi, sent from Marcus's phone. "Miss Amara. Daddy taught me how to make star-shaped pancakes this morning. When can I show you?" The message made her smile despite her interview anxiety. Over the past few days, Kemi had been texting her regularly, always from Marcus's phone, always with updates about his day or questions about hers. The little boy was clearly working hard to weave her into the fabric of his daily life, and each message felt like a small gift. "That's wonderful," she texted back. "I can't wait to see them. How did Daddy do with the pancake making?" "He only burned 2 of them. And he sang one of the songs you taught me while we cooked. Mrs. Patterson says he hasn't sung in a really long time." The image of Marcus singing while making star-shaped pancakes for his son hit Amara with unexpected emotion. This was the man she was falling in love with, not the millionaire with all the answers, but the father learning to heal his son's heart and his own. That evening, Marcus called while she was getting ready for her night shift at the office building. "How did the interview go?" he asked, and she could hear the carefully controlled anxiety in his voice. "I think it went well," Amara said honestly. "Your board asked tough questions, but fair ones. Dr. Williams is formidable." "She is. She was Catherine's mentor when Catherine was in graduate school. She doesn't suffer fools, and she protects this place like a mother bear." "Good," Amara said, meaning it. "That's what a place like this needs." "Amara," Marcus said, his voice growing more serious. "Whatever they decide, I want you to know that I'm proud of you for trying. I know this wasn't easy, putting yourself out there like that." "It wasn't," she agreed. "But it felt right. Even if I don't get the job, I'm glad I went through the process. It helped me clarify some things about what I want from life." "Such as?" Amara sat down on her small couch, phone pressed to her ear, and tried to put her thoughts into words. "I want to build something that matters. I want to use my experiences to help other people navigate theirs. And I want to do it in a way that honors where I came from while moving me toward where I want to go." "That sounds like Catherine," Marcus said softly. "She used to say that the best way to honor a difficult past was to use it to make someone else's future easier." "I would have liked her," Amara said. "You would have loved her. And she would have loved you. She would have said you were exactly what Kemi and I needed, even if we were too stubborn to see it ourselves." After they hung up, Amara got ready for work with a lighter heart than she'd carried in months. Whatever happened with the job, whatever challenges lay ahead in building a relationship with Marcus and Kemi, she felt for the first time in years like she was moving toward something rather than just surviving something. The next morning brought a call from Dr. Williams. "Miss Johnson, the board has made its decision. We'd like to offer you the position of program director, contingent on a background check and reference verification. The salary is $42,000 to start, with full benefits and tuition assistance. Are you interested?" Amara sat down heavily on her kitchen chair, staring at the bills scattered across her table. Bills she would finally be able to pay without working herself to exhaustion, bills that would become manageable parts of a budget rather than constant sources of stress. "Yes," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "Yes, I'm very interested." "Excellent. There is one condition we need to discuss. Given your personal relationship with our benefactor, the board has decided that your performance will be evaluated by an independent committee every 6 months for the first 2 years. This is to ensure that personal dynamics don't interfere with professional responsibilities, for your protection as much as the center's." "I think that's very reasonable," Amara said, meaning it. "Good. Can you start Monday? I know that's short notice, but our interim director is eager to get back to her regular duties." After she hung up, Amara sat in her tiny apartment for a long time, processing the fact that her life was about to change dramatically. In 1 week, she would go from working 3 jobs to working 1 job that paid more than all 3 combined. She would go from scraping by to having financial stability. She would go from dreaming about college to having a clear path to make it happen. But more than that, she would be doing work that mattered, work that aligned with her values and utilized her experiences. She would be helping people like herself navigate systems designed by people who had never faced the challenges they were trying to overcome. Her phone rang, interrupting her thoughts. It was Marcus. "Congratulations," he said, and she could hear the smile in his voice. "Dr. Williams called me after she spoke with you. I'm so proud of you." "Thank you," Amara said, "for believing in me, for showing me the opportunity, for letting me prove myself independently." "Thank you for taking the risk," Marcus replied. For trusting that this could be about your qualifications rather than our relationship. Speaking of our relationship, Amara said, taking a deep breath. I think we need to talk about how this changes things. How we navigate working together professionally while building something personal. I agree, Marcus said. But first, there's someone here who wants to congratulate you himself. The phone was passed, and Kemi's excited voice filled her ear. Miss Amara. Daddy told me you got the job at our center. Does this mean you'll be there when I come after school? Does this mean we can see you every day? It means I'll be working there, Amara said carefully. And yes, if you come by after school, I'll probably see you sometimes. This is the best news ever. Kemi exclaimed. Now we can really be a family. After the call ended, Amara sat in her apartment thinking about Kemi's innocent assumption that proximity would automatically translate to family. The little boy's eagerness both warmed her heart and worried her. They were all walking into uncharted territory, trying to balance professional responsibilities with personal relationships, trying to build something new while honoring something lost. But as she looked around her small apartment and began to think about the changes that lay ahead, Amara realized that for the first time since her grandmother died, she felt genuinely hopeful about the future. Not just hopeful that she would survive, but hopeful that she would thrive. The question now was whether she, Marcus, and Kemi could figure out how to build a family that honored all of their needs while navigating the complexities that came with their unusual circumstances. Only time would tell, but Amara was finally ready to find out. 6 months later, Amara stood in the main hall of the Catherine Okafor Community Center, watching families celebrate their graduates from the GED program. The room buzzed with a kind of joy that came from hard-earned victories, from people who had worked nights and weekends to claim education that circumstances had stolen from them earlier in life. Miss Amara, look. Kemi tugged at her sleeve, pointing to where his father was helping an elderly man in a cap and gown adjust his graduation sash. Daddy's crying happy tears again. It was true. Marcus had developed a habit of getting emotional at these celebrations, something that would have surprised the man who had first pretended to be a janitor but felt natural to the man who had learned to let his heart show. In 6 months of working together, Amara had watched him transform from someone who wrote checks to someone who knew every program participant's name and story. He's proud, Amara explained to Kemi. The same way he's proud when you do something brave or kind. Their relationship had evolved slowly, carefully, with the kind of intentionality that came from understanding how high the stakes were. Marcus had kept his promise about not trying to rescue her. He let her struggle with difficult clients, supported her decisions even when he might have chosen differently, and treated her as an equal partner in the center's leadership. Amara, for her part, had learned to accept help without feeling diminished by it. When her car broke down in month 3, she had let Marcus arrange for repairs without turning it into a battle about independence. When Kemi had nightmares after watching a sad movie, she had stayed the night to help comfort him without worrying that she was overstepping boundaries. Miss Amara, called out Maria Santos, one of tonight's graduates. I wanted you to meet my daughter. She gestured to a young woman about Amara's age holding a baby. She's starting the program next month, and I told her you would understand what it's like to be young and scared and trying to build something better. As Amara talked with Maria's daughter, explaining the center's childcare options and financial literacy classes, she felt the deep satisfaction that came from work that mattered. In 6 months, she had helped dozens of people navigate systems that had once intimidated her. She had advocated for policy changes that made programs more accessible. She had even testified before the city council about the need for more community-based support services. You're in your element, Marcus said quietly, appearing beside her as the celebration wound down. I am, Amara agreed, watching families head home with diplomas and hope in equal measure. Thank you for seeing that before I did. Thank you for taking the risk to find out. They walked through the center together, turning off lights and locking doors with the comfortable routine of people who had learned to work as a team. In the main hall, a banner still hung from tonight's ceremony. Dreams delayed are not dreams denied. Kemi's at Mrs. Patterson's tonight? Amara asked as they headed to the parking lot. Sleepover with his friend David, Marcus replied. Which means we actually have a few hours to ourselves for once. It was a rare occurrence. Between Amara's work at the center, her evening classes at Georgia State, where she was now halfway through her social work degree, and their shared commitment to making sure Kemi felt secure and prioritized, they rarely had uninterrupted time together. "Your place or mine?" Marcus asked with a smile that acknowledged the obvious answer. Amara's apartment had become their retreat, the place where millionaire Marcus became simply the man she loved, where they could exist without the weight of his wealth or the complexity of their professional relationship. An hour later, they sat on Amara's couch sharing Chinese takeout and talking about their days. It was the kind of ordinary evening that Amara had once thought was incompatible with loving someone like Marcus, but which had become the foundation of their relationship. "I got a call from Dr. Williams today," Marcus said as they finished eating. "Your 6-month evaluation came back." Amara tensed slightly. The independent evaluation process had been fair but thorough, with board members conducting interviews with program participants, staff, and community partners to assess her performance. "And outstanding in every category," Marcus said, unable to hide his pride. "Dr. Williams said you've exceeded every expectation they had. They're recommending you for early promotion to executive director." The news should have felt triumphant, but instead Amara felt a familiar flutter of anxiety. "What does that mean for us? For the center?" "It means you'll be running the day-to-day operations with even more autonomy," Marcus said. "It means a significant salary increase and the opportunity to expand programs you're passionate about. And it means the board trusts you completely to separate personal and professional responsibilities." "And what about you? How do you feel about your girlfriend becoming your equal partner in running the center?" Marcus set down his chopsticks and turned to face her fully. "I feel like Catherine would be proud of what we've built here. The center, our relationship, the family we're creating with Kemi. I feel like we've proven that love and respect can coexist with professional partnership." "Most of the time," Amara said with a smile, thinking of their occasional disagreements about program priorities or budget allocations. "Especially when we disagree," Marcus corrected. "Those conversations make us both better at what we do." They cleaned up dinner together, and as they moved around Amara's small kitchen, she found herself thinking about how much had changed since that night 6 months ago when she had discovered Marcus's true identity. The anger and betrayal she had felt then seemed like emotions belonging to different people who hadn't yet learned how to build trust on a foundation of honesty and mutual respect. "Can I tell you something?" Amara said as they settled back on the couch. "Always." "I'm happy," she said simply. "Not just content, not just grateful, but genuinely happy. I wake up excited about my work, I go to sleep feeling like I've made a difference, and I'm building a future that feels authentic to who I am." "Even with all the complications? Even with the wealth disparity and the professional entanglement and the fact that you're dating a man who lied to you for 3 months?" Amara considered the question seriously. "Because of those complications," she said finally. "They forced us to be intentional about everything. We couldn't just drift into a relationship. We had to choose it actively, every day. We had to figure out how to be equals when the world wanted to make us unequal. We had to learn how to love each other without losing ourselves." Marcus reached for her hand, intertwining their fingers with the familiarity of 6 months of learning each other's rhythms. "What about Kemi? Do you think he's happy?" "I think he's healing," Amara said. "He still misses his mother. He always will. But he's not afraid anymore that the adults in his life are going to disappear. He's not performing for love anymore." It was true. Over the months, Kemi had relaxed into the security of having both his father and Amara as constant, reliable presences. He had stopped asking if Amara was going to stay and started planning family activities months in advance. He had begun talking about his mother with joy instead of only sadness, sharing memories and asking Amara to help him understand how someone could hold 2 mothers in their heart at the same time. "There's something I need to ask you," Marcus said, his voice growing more serious. "What's that?" Marcus slid off the couch and onto one knee beside the coffee table, pulling a small velvet box from his pocket. Amara's breath caught as she realized what was happening. "Amara Johnson," he said, opening the box to reveal a simple but beautiful ring that looked nothing like the flashy engagement rings she associated with wealthy men. "You've taught me that love isn't about rescuing someone or being rescued. It's about choosing to build something together every single day. Will you marry me? Will you choose to keep building this life with Kemi and me?" Amara looked at the ring, then at Marcus's face, then around her small apartment where they had shared so many quiet evenings. She thought about the journey that had brought them here, the deception that had nearly destroyed them, the trust they had rebuilt piece by piece, the family they had created through intention and commitment rather than circumstance. "Yes," she said, her voice strong and certain. "Yes, I want to keep building this life with you." As Marcus slipped the ring onto her finger, Amara realized that their story had never been about a millionaire pretending to be poor or a maid shocking everyone with her worthiness. It had been about two broken people learning to trust again, about a grieving child finding the courage to love a new mother, about the possibility of building authentic relationships even when the circumstances seemed impossible. The ring fit perfectly, and as Marcus kissed her in the lamplight of her small living room, Amara understood that she had finally found what she had been searching for since her grandmother died, a family built on love, respect, and the shared commitment to keep choosing each other every single day. Outside, Atlanta hummed with its usual energy, but inside Amara's apartment, 3 lives had just committed to becoming one story. Not the fairy tale version where wealth solves every problem, but the real version where love requires daily choice, where family is built through small acts of care, and where happiness comes not from having all the answers but from being brave enough to keep asking the important questions together. 6 months later, they would marry in the community center, surrounded by program participants and board members and all the people whose lives they had touched through their work together. Kemi would be the ring bearer, beaming with the joy of a child whose family was finally complete. Dr. Williams would officiate, speaking about love as service and partnership as sacred work. But that night, in Amara's small apartment with Chinese takeout containers still on the coffee table and the ring new on her finger, there were just 3 people who had found each other against impossible odds and chosen to build something beautiful together. The poor maid had indeed shocked everyone, not by landing a millionaire, but by proving that authentic love could bloom even in soil made fertile by deception, that trust could be rebuilt stronger than it was before, and that the most profound transformations happen not when someone rescues us, but when we find the courage to rescue ourselves and then choose to share that strength with others. Their story was ending where all the best love stories do. Not with a conclusion, but with a promise to keep writing new chapters together, whatever challenges and joys lay ahead. Thank you so much for joining me on Amara, Marcus, and Kemi's incredible journey. This story of love, deception, healing, and second chances shows us that sometimes the most beautiful families are built not through perfection, but through the courage to be honest about our imperfections and still choose each other anyway. If this story touched your heart, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel for more amazing stories like this one. Share it with someone who believes in the power of authentic love and second chances. And let me know in the comments, what did you think of Marcus's test? Was Amara right to forgive him? Have you ever had to rebuild trust after a major deception? Remember, the best love stories aren't about finding someone perfect. They're about finding someone worth working through the imperfections with. Until next time, keep believing in the power of love to transform even the most complicated situations into something beautiful.